My wife looked me in the eye after months of sleeping with another man and told me she deserved to feel alive again, and I just smiled at her because she had no clue what I'd put my name to at 8 o'clock that same morning. Listen, before I walk you through the whole thing, I really do appreciate you being here more than a comment box can hold. Do me one favor, would you? Drop the name of your town down below so I know who I'm actually talking to, and I'll call you out by name in the next one. And if you've got it in you, tap that like hit subscribe. That's the stuff that lets a guy like me keep telling these. So, all right. Let me start where this thing really starts, which isn't with her, it's with my dad. My dad worked at a mill down along the Mon for almost 30 years. Edgar Thompson, out in Braddock, back when that whole stretch of the river still ran on it. He was a big, quiet guy, hands like catcher's mitts, and he never once in my life told me he loved me out loud. He just showed up. Every game, every school thing, every time my car broke down on the parkway at midnight. When he passed, it was fast, pancreatic, 6 months from the diagnosis to the funeral out at a little church in Swiss Vale, and I was 31, and I felt like somebody had cut the ground out from under me. He left me a little money, not a fortune, his life insurance and what he'd squirreled away, and I remember sitting in the lawyer's office in Greensburg feeling almost sick about it, because it was his, it was 30 years of him standing in front of a furnace, and now it was a number on a check with my name on it. I did 2 things with that money. 2. I want you to remember that because it's the whole story, really. The first thing, I put a down payment on a house in Regent Square. Little brick place off Trevanian, the kind of street with the big old maples that turn the whole block orange in October. And the second thing, I sank the rest into opening my own shop. I'm a cabinet maker. Custom stuff, built-ins, kitchens, the real thing, hardwood, dovetails, no particle board junk. I'd been working for another guy for years, and my dad always said, "You got a gift with your hands? Don't spend your life making another man rich." So I took his money, and I bet it on myself. Called the shop Thompson Woodworks, his name and mine, same name, and that's where I was, 32, brand new shop, brand new mortgage, grieving my old man when I met Nicole. She came in about a quote, wanted a whole kitchen redone in this condo she was renting up in Shadyside, which I should have clocked that she was renting a place that fancy, but I didn't, because she walked into my little sawdust shop in this cream coat looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine, and she laughed at something dumb I said about the table saw, and man, that was it for me. I was gone. She was sharp. Funny in this dry way where you'd catch it 2 seconds late. Worked in pharma sales, drove a leased Audi, always looked put together in a way I never would. And I think, honestly, part of what got me was that a woman like that looked at a guy like me, covered in wood shavings, and picked me. Felt like winning something. We got married about a year and a half later, small thing, out at a winery in Greensburg, near where my dad was buried, which mattered to me. Having him close by even for a day like that, and for a good while, I mean years, I thought we were happy. I really did. Here's the thing I only saw later, though. Nicole loved the house, loved it. More than she loved, I don't know, a lot of things. She redid the whole inside, subway tile, the gray cabinets, the light fixtures off some designer's Instagram, and when people came over, she'd give the tour like it was a model home. And she never, not once, cared about the shop. Called it my little hobby, to my face. Would tell people at parties, "Oh, he tinkers with wood." Isn't that cute? And I let it slide because I loved her, and because the shop was mine, it was me and my dad. And I didn't need her to get it. Turned out that not caring about the shop, that was gonna matter more than either of us knew. Okay, so let me get to how it started coming apart. It was a Tuesday in February, and if you know Pittsburgh in February, you know the sky's the color of a nickel, and it doesn't get better till like April. I'd left the shop early because we'd finished a big install over in Mount Lebanon, and I figured I'd surprise her, pick up some stuff from the Italian place on Braddock Avenue, make dinner for once. Nice, right? That was the plan. She wasn't home. Fine. She traveled for work. Sometimes she ran late. But her iPad was on the kitchen island, and it was buzzing, And I glanced down, not snooping, just a reflex the way you do, and there was a message on the screen and it said, and I'm going to say this exactly, it said, still thinking about last weekend, can't wait for Thursday. From a contact just saved as B. And my stomach didn't drop, that's not the right way to say it. It went cold. Like all the blood in me just kind of stopped. Because we'd been in Ohio the weekend before, at her sister's, together the whole time. So what last weekend? I'm not proud of what I did next, but I did it. I picked up that iPad, and I sat down at my own kitchen table in my coat, and I read, and I read. Months, man, months of it. Going back to before Thanksgiving. This guy, B, and my wife, planning hotels, planning lies, her telling him the shop kept me busy enough that she had all the room in the world. She actually wrote that. She used my work, the thing she called a cute little hobby, as her cover. And I found out who B was that same night because they got sloppy and he signed off one message with his whole name, Brett. Brett was a guy from her sales world, some regional something, one of those guys with the veneers and the vest over the dress shirt who talks about his portfolio at parties. I'd met him twice, shook his hand. He'd looked me right in the eye both times. Now here's where a lot of guys blow it, and I get it, I do, because everything in me wanted to blow it too. Everything in me wanted to be standing in that kitchen when she walked in, phone in my hand, and scream the roof down. I didn't. I want to tell you I was calm because I'm some wise guy. I wasn't calm. I threw up, actually, in my own bathroom, quiet so the neighbors wouldn't hear through the walls of these old houses. But somewhere in the middle of all that, my dad's voice was in my head, and my dad, when something bad happened, he never got loud. He got quiet, and he got careful. Measure twice, cut once, he used to say, and he wasn't talking about wood. So I put the iPad back exactly where it was, angle and all. And I went upstairs and I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. And I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to give her the fight. I was going to give her the surprise. The next morning I went to work like normal, kissed her on the cheek. Hardest thing I ever did, that kiss. And on my lunch I sat in my truck in the shop lot and I called a divorce attorney. Her name was Diane Kowalski. Office downtown in one of those buildings on Grant Street. And I picked her because a buddy of mine, Vince, who's also my partner at the shop, I'll get to Vince, his brother went through an ugly one and swore by her, said she was the meanest sweet lady in Allegheny County. That turned out to be exactly right. I sat down across from Diane and I laid it all out, and I want to tell you about this because it's the part that changed everything. She listened, didn't interrupt. And when I was done, she took her glasses off, and she said, "Okay, first thing, have you told her you know?" "No," I said. "Good," she said, "don't." And she said it like a command. She said, "Right now, you have the one thing people in your spot almost never have. Time, and the fact that she thinks she's the only one holding cards. Do not throw that away for the satisfaction of a fight. You'll get your satisfaction. I promise you'll get it. But we do it my way, and we do it quiet." Then she asked me about money, and this is where I found out that my dad, God rest him, had reached out from that little churchyard in Greensburg and set me up without either of us ever knowing it. She asked how we bought the house. And I told her the down payment came from my father's estate, the life insurance, all of it, before I ever met Nicole. And I still had every statement because I'm my father's son, and I keep every scrap of paper in a fireproof box in the basement. Diane sat up a little at that. She said you can trace it. You can show the exact money. That, she said, is what we call separate property. Money that was yours before the marriage that you can follow dollar for dollar into that house. And she said, Pennsylvania splits marital property fair. They call it equitable distribution, but separate property, traced clean, that comes off the top. That's yours. And then she asked about the shop. And I told her the same. My dad's money started it, and it's an LLC, and me and Vince have a partnership agreement drawn up years ago with a buy-sell clause in it, the standard thing. If one of us wants out or something happens, the other can buy the share at a set formula. And Diane got real quiet and real focused, and she said, "Do you have that agreement?" And I said, "Fireproof box, basement." And she almost laughed. She said, "Your father raised you to keep your papers, didn't he?" "Yeah," I said. "He did." She said, "Then here's what we're going to do, and I need you to be patient, and I need you to be a good actor for a few weeks." "Can you do that?" "I can do that," I said. "So now let me tell you about the few weeks, because this is where it got hard, and then it got worse, and then it got kind of unbelievable. I went home every night to a woman who was cheating on me, and I acted like a husband. I made small talk. I asked about her day knowing she was lying in it. And the Thursdays, she couldn't wait for, I'd say, "Have a good trip, babe." And she'd roll her little carry-on out to the Audi, and I'd stand in the doorway and wave. And then I'd drive to Diane's or to my accountant, and I'd work. Because here's what we were doing. We were documenting everything. Diane had me pull every bank statement tracing my dad's money into the house, down payment, into the shop. My accountant, a guy named Sal who does the shop's books, he built me a clean paper trail you could hand a judge, and a 9-year-old would understand it. This dollar came from here, went to there. All of it. And here's the wave that knocked me flat, though. Because I told you Nicole didn't care about the shop, right? Called it a hobby. So imagine my face when Diane, going through what she could find, tells me that in a couple of Nicole's messages to Brett, the ones I'd photographed off that iPad, my wife is talking about the shop like she's already spending it. Turns out, cute little hobby was cute, right up until a lawyer put a number on it. Nicole had apparently been running her own quiet math. She told Brett, and I'm paraphrasing but barely, she said, "The woodworking business is worth more than my sad husband realizes, and half of it, plus the house sets us up nice. Us set us up nice. She and Brett, planning to take my dead father's money, the house he bought me, and the shop that has his name on the sign, and split it and go build a life on it." I read that in Diane's office, and I had to go stand in the hallway for a minute. And when I came back, I said, "Diane, what do we do?" And she smiled that mean, sweet smile, and she said, "We let her keep planning. The more concrete her plan, the softer she'll be when it hits nothing." Now, Brett. I couldn't leave Brett alone, and Diane told me leave Brett alone, and mostly I did. But let me tell you about Brett, because Brett gets his. I did one thing. I did a little quiet homework on Mr. Vest over the dress shirt. And it turns out Brett fancied himself a finance genius, always had a deal going, always about to be rich. And it turns out Brett was leaning on my wife almost as hard as she was leaning on me. Because Brett had money trouble, he kept real quiet. And a chunk of what he loved about Nicole was the payday he thought was coming when she cashed out of her marriage. I didn't have to do anything with that. I just filed it away, measure twice. Meanwhile, the acting. God, the acting. There was one night, and I'll never forget this, we had her sister and brother-in-law over for dinner at the house, my dad's house, and Nicole did her little tour, the tile, the fixtures, and her sister goes, "You two are just the perfect couple." And Nicole reaches over and squeezes my hand and says, "I got so lucky." And everybody laughs, and I smile, and I squeeze back, and inside I'm thinking, 31 days. Diane said, 31 more days. You want to know the moment I almost lost it? There was this one Sunday. Nicole's in the kitchen, and she's on the phone with, I found out later, Brett. And I'm in the next room, and I hear her laugh, this loose, easy laugh, the one I used to think was mine. And then I hear her say, "Lo, he has no idea. He's completely clueless." And then that laugh again. He has no idea. And you know what, buddy? She was right. I had no idea. I had no idea she thought a guy who keeps 30 years of his father's paperwork in a fireproof box in the basement was clueless. She really did think that. That was the mistake, not the affair even. The affair was just cruel. The mistake was thinking I was stupid. So let me take you to the machinery, because this is the part that matters. Diane and Sal and me, over those weeks, we built the whole thing. The house traced clean back to my dad's estate, documented as my separate property, every dollar. The shop, LLC, with that buy-sell agreement, and Diane and Vince and me, we had a long, careful talk, and Vince, who'd known my dad and loved that shop like I do, Vince agreed that when the time came, he would buy out and lock down the ownership structure exactly the way the agreement laid out at the formula price set years ago, before any of this, so that when Nicole's lawyer came looking for half of some inflated dream number, what they'd find was a business already handled, valued, and structured clean, by the book, no games, just paper, doing what paper does. And then Diane filed. She had the divorce petition ready, and she said, "We file first on our terms, with everything already in place. When she gets served, it's not a threat she can plan around. It's already done." And she asked me, "When do you want to do it?" And I picked the morning. I picked a specific morning, because I knew Nicole had something planned. See? Here's what I hadn't told you. Nicole didn't know I knew, but I knew her, and I could feel her building up to something. She'd started dropping these little lines. "We should really talk soon. I've been doing a lot of thinking." That kind of thing. And I knew the way you know weather's coming that she was getting ready to drop the divorce on me. She wanted to be the one. She wanted to walk in, calm and superior, and blow up my life and watch me break, and then clean me out. She had a date in mind, I could tell, and I made sure Diane's filing landed the exact same morning. So that morning comes, and I get up early, and I go downtown, and I sit in Diane's office at 8 o'clock in the morning while the city's still gray and half asleep, and I sign my name. I signed the divorce petition. I signed the papers finalizing the buy-sell so the shop was locked down clean. I signed the whole stack, every page Diane slid across, and she notarized what needed notarizing, and it was filed with the court that same hour. I signed it all at 8 in the morning. Remember that. 8 in the morning. Then I drove home, and I made coffee, and I waited for my wife to ruin my life. She came downstairs around 10, and she was dressed, actually dressed, hair done, like she was going somewhere, which I realized was for effect. She'd dressed for the occasion of destroying me. She poured herself a cup, and she leaned against my dad's kitchen counter, and she looked at me with this face, this rehearsed, sad face, and she said, "We need to talk." And I put my coffee down, and I said, "Okay." And she went into it, this whole speech, about how she'd changed and I'd changed and we'd grown apart, all the words people use, and how she hadn't been happy in a long time, and then she got to the part she'd clearly been saving. She looked at me and she said there'd been someone else, for a while now. And she said it almost proud, like a confession that's really a brag. And she watched my face for the break. And I didn't give it to her. So she pushed. She got a little sharper. She said, "Don't just sit there." And then she said the thing. She stood in my dead father's kitchen, and she said, "I'm not going to apologize for it. I deserve to feel alive again. I deserve to feel alive again." And that's when I smiled. Not a big smile, just a little one. And I watched it land on her, and I watched it confuse her, because that was not in her script. In her script I break. In her script I beg, or I rage. And either way she wins. She's got the high ground. She's got Brett. She's got the plan. She's got half of everything. She said, "What? What is wrong with you? Why are you smiling?" And I said, real quiet, "Nicole, what day is it?" And she just blinked. And I said, "You should check your email. Or your lawyer's going to call you first, but check your email." Because at 8 o'clock that morning, hours before she came downstairs in her nice outfit to blow up my world, I had already filed. She'd been served, or was about to be. The house was documented as mine. My dad's money, clean. The shop was locked. There was no half of everything. There was no us and Brett riding off on my father's estate. She'd spent months planning to spring a trap, and she'd walked into the exact spot where I'd already built one, and she'd sprung it on empty air. You want to know what her face did? It went from that rehearsed, sad look to confusion, to this real ugly kind of panic, all in about 10 seconds. She grabbed her phone, and I watched her read whatever was there. And her hand started shaking, the coffee cup rattling against the counter, and she said, "You," and she couldn't finish it. And she said, "What did you do?" "What did I do?" I said, "I kept my papers, Nicole, like my dad taught me. Now, I'm going to tell you how it actually shook out, because a smile in a kitchen is one thing, but you want the reckoning, and there was one, and it took a couple months, and it was thorough. Nicole hired a lawyer, of course, some guy she picked because he was expensive, which she thought meant good. And he came at it hard at first, half the house, half the business, the whole fantasy. And then Diane sent over Sal's paper trail. The house traced dollar for dollar to my father's estate, separate property, off the top. The business, LLC, buy-sell, exercised clean and on the books, structured and valued by the agreement that existed years before Nicole ever set foot in my shop. I wasn't in the room for the mediation, but Diane told me after, and she was almost gleeful. She said Nicole's lawyer went through the file and got real quiet, and then had a hard conversation with his client. And the number Nicole had been dreaming on, the number she promised Brett would set them up nice, that number was gone. There was some marital stuff, sure, the equitable split of what we'd built together during the marriage, and she got her fair piece of that. I never fought her on what was actually hers. I'm not a monster. But my dad's house stayed my dad's house, and the shop stayed the shop, his name and mine on the sign. And here's the part that mirrors how it started, the way these things do if you're patient. Nicole loved that house, you remember? More than she loved a lot of things. The tile, the fixtures, the tour. And she does not have it. She had to sign a quitclaim on it, sign her name giving up any claim, in a lawyer's office, and Diane said she was shaking when she did it, and I believe it. The one thing she cared about most in the world, the house she showed off like it was proof of the life she'd built, gone, and it was gone because it was never really hers. It was my father's, from a mill in Braddock, and no amount of subway tile ever changed that. Now, Brett. I promised you Brett. Brett found out there was no payday about 2 weeks after the filing, and you already know what Brett was really in it for. So Brett, the finance genius with the quiet money trouble, Brett did the math on a Nicole with a modest settlement and a whole lot of legal bills and no dream house, and Brett vanished. Just gone. Stopped answering. My buddy Vince ran into a guy who knows Brett and heard that Brett had, quote, moved on to focus on himself, which is finance vest talk for the well ran dry. So Nicole burned down her marriage, her house, my trust, all of it, to feel alive again with a man who wanted her cut of my dead dad's money, and when there was no cut, that man walked out the door faster than I ever would have. She lost me, she lost the house, and she lost him, and she got, in the end, exactly what she'd have gotten if she'd just been honest and asked for a divorce like a person. Her fair share and nothing more. All that scheming, all those Thursdays, for the same number she'd have gotten by just telling the truth. Let me tell you about the quiet after. The first night I spent in that house alone, after she'd moved her stuff out, I did not feel triumphant. I want to be honest with you about that. I sat on the floor of the living room because half the furniture was gone, and the house was so quiet I could hear the old radiators tick, and I felt this weird, heavy sadness because I'd loved her, and part of me was mourning a woman who, it turned out, had never really existed. But then, the next morning I got up and I drove out to the shop early, before Vince, before anybody, and I let myself in, and I stood there in the smell of it, the sawdust and the varnish and the machine oil, my dad's old radio still on the shelf where I keep it, and the sign out front with our name on it, and I put a fresh board on the bench, and I just started working. And somewhere in there, I don't know when, I noticed my shoulders had come down from around my ears where they'd been living for months. I took a breath, a real one, all the way down, the kind you don't even know you haven't been taking until you finally do. And I thought about my dad, big, quiet guy, hands like catcher's mitts, 30 years in front of a furnace. He never told me he loved me out loud. He just kept his papers, and he handed me the tools, and he set me up so that, when the worst came, I'd be standing on ground nobody could pull out from under me. And she called it a hobby, and it saved my whole life. So here's the thing I'd leave you with, wherever you are, whatever town you dropped in the comments. When somebody's willing to burn your whole life to the ground to make themselves feel good, they're not confused, and they're not lost, and they're not going to change if you just love them harder. They're telling you the plain truth about what you were worth to them. Believe them the first time. And in the meantime, quietly, keep your papers, keep your head, and do the careful work. Loud feels good for a night. careful sets you free for the rest of it. My dad taught me that, and I'll be grateful to that quiet man for the rest of my days.